what is Kubectl? So the Kubectl is simply a command line interface. So the Kubectl command line tool lets you control these Kubernetes clusters that you create. Now for configuration, Kubectl looks for a file named config in the home.kube directory. Here you can specify other kubeconfig files by setting the kubeconfig environment variable or by setting the kubeconfig flag. This overview covers Kubectl syntax, describes the command operations, and provides various common examples. Now, if you look at the syntax of the screen, which is used to run Kubectl commands from your terminal window, you can see that it is simply Kubectl, command, type, name, and the flags. Where command specifies the operation that you want to perform on one or more resources. For example, if you want to create, get, describe, delete, any of that. The next one is type, which specifies the resource type. Resource types are case sensitive, and you can specify the singular, plural, or abbreviated forms. Now, for example, you can, type in the following commands which produces the same output. For example, kubectl get pod1, kubectl get pods pod1, kubectl get po pod1. All of these commands produce the same output. Name, on the other hand, specifies the name of the resource. Names are case sensitive. Now, if the name is omitted, details for all the resources are explained or displayed. For example, kubectl get pods will really give you an entire overview of all the pods that are running on your cluster. When performing an operation on multiple resources, you can specify each resource by type and name or specify one or more files. To group resources if they're all the same, you can use the syntax type1, name2, etc. And to specify multiple resource types individually, you can just use the syntax type1/name1, type1/name2, type2/name3, etc. Flags, on the other hand, specifies optional flags. For example, you can use the -s or -- server flags to specify the address and port of the Kubernetes API server. Now that we know what is Kubectl, which is just a command line tool that lets you control Kubernetes clusters and also its syntax in detail, let's move ahead and talk about what is Minikube. So Minikube is a tool that lets you run Kubernetes locally. Minikube runs on a single node Kubernetes cluster on your personal computer, which includes Windows, Mac OS, and Linux PCs, so that you can try out Kubernetes or for daily development work. All you need is Docker or similarly compatible container, or also a virtual machine environment, and Kubernetes is a single command away. That is, you can use Minikube start to get it running. The advantages of Minikube is that it supports the latest Kubernetes release, it is cross-platform, and it can be deployed as a virtual machine, a container, or on a bare metal. It also contains multiple container runtimes. So Minikube is basically a tool that lets Kubernetes run on your local machine without any installation except for the Minikube library. So in summary, Minikube is a tool that lets you use Kubernetes on your local machine without any installation except for the Minikube library. It takes advantage of your local hypervisor and launches a virtual machine that runs Kubernetes in a single node. Now, to install the Minikube and Kubectl, you can get the latest release or build from the official website. So without much ado, let's go and install them. So now currently I'm on my Oracle VM VirtualBox and we are working on Ubuntu. So we'll be installing the Kubectl on Ubuntu, and we'll be installing using native package management, that is Debian-based distributions. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to update the apt package index and install packages needed to use the Kubernetes app repository. And for that, I am going to type in the command sudo apt get update. Okay. So I have the list of commands already on my notepad. So I'm just going to copy this command and I'm going to paste it. So new packages will be installed and also the existing ones will be upgraded. So once the installations and updates have been done, I'm just going to clear the screen. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to download the Google Cloud Public Signing Key. Okay, and for that, we're going to use this command. followed by which we can add the Kubernetes apt repository. So I'm going to copy and paste this command. So finally, I'm going to update the app package index with the new repository and install kubectl. Now, once it's successfully installed, in order for kubectl to find and access a Kubernetes cluster, it needs a kubeconfig file, which is created automatically when you create a cluster using kubeup.sh or successfully deploy a Minikube cluster. Now, by default, kubectl configuration is located in the .kube/config. So now that we've installed kubectl successfully, I'm going to test to ensure the version that we've installed is up to date. So for this, I'm going to execute the command kubectl space version space dash dash client. Now we can see the Git version and we can see the major version. All of the information is given here. We have successfully installed kubectl. Now let's clear the screen. So now that we've installed kubectl, let's move ahead and install Minikube to run a local Kubernetes instance. So as we've already talked about it, Minikube is a tool that lets you use Kubernetes on your local machine without any installation except for the Minikube library. You will have to install Docker and you'll have to install VirtualBox before you can install Minikube. Otherwise, Minikube will not work. So once you do all of that, then all you can do is you can just install the Minikube library into your system. So for this, we're just going to use these commands. I'm just going to copy them and paste them. And once Minikube is installed, you can verify the version that is running the following command, that is Minikube version. You can see that we've installed version v1.20.0. So you can start the Minikube by using the command sudo minikube start. Now, once the startup phase has finished, which will take some amount of time, your Kubernetes client, that is kubectl, will have a Minikube context and will automatically start using this context. So you can also see that kubectl is configured to using Minikube cluster and default namespace by default. We'll talk about namespace in a bit. Now let us just check what nodes we will have in our cluster, which will return the Minikube hostname. And for this, I'm just going to clear my screen and type in the command sudo kubectl get nodes. You can see there is a node edureka. Its status is ready. So let us check out each of the commands that are available, some of the basic commands that are available. So first one is the get command. So what it does is the first command, it lists all the pods in PS output format. Okay. There is another type of command which lists all pods in PS output format with more information such as the node name. For that, we can just use the command kubectl get pods -o wide. Currently, we do not have any resources in the namespace, so it's not going to display any. Now, to test that kubectl can authenticate with and access your Kubernetes cluster, you can use the cluster-info command. So you can type in the command sudo kubectl cluster-info. And if kubectl is successfully authenticated with your cluster, you should see the following output. So kubectl is configured using kubeconfig configuration files. And by default, kubectl will look for a file called config in the home/.kube directory. Now to view your kubectl configuration, you can use the view sub command. So I'm just going to type sudo kubectl config space view. And this will give you the API version, that is v1, the cluster, that's Minikube. So you can see the API version, that is v1, you can see the clusters, you can see the contexts, and you can see the correct context, kind, preferences, users. Okay. Now I'm just going to clear the screen. Now to fetch a list of clusters defined in your kubeconfig, you can just use the get-clusters command. So I'm just going to type in sudo kubectl config get dash clusters. So the output will be the list of clusters that is defined in our kube config file. And as you can see that in the output is the Minikube. So you can also delete a cluster from your config using the delete dash cluster command. I'm not going to show you the output of this, but I'm just going to type in the command. Okay, so what this does is it only deletes the cluster from your config file. Okay, it does not delete the actual Kubernetes cluster. So this is really important to know. Now moving on, you can also see a list of all the configured contexts. For that, you can just use the command config get contexts. And what it does is it gives you the name of the cluster and the authentication information and the namespace. Okay, this is like just, it gives you like a list of contexts that are available. So I haven't explained you what exactly a context is. A context in Kubernetes is an object that contains a set of access parameters for your cluster. It consists of a cluster, namespace, and user triple. Contexts really allow you to quickly switch between different sets of cluster configurations. If you want to see your current context that you are working on, you can just use the current context command. Okay, and you can see that we are currently on the context Minikube. Okay, now to set a particular context, you use the set context command. So for this, I'm going to type in the command set context 1. So I'm just going to name my context 1. Cluster dash cluster is equal to your cluster name. I'm just going to name this cluster 1. User is equal to user 1. And you can also have a namespace. We know that we have one namespace that is our default namespace, right? So I haven't really talked about namespaces either. So let me explain it to you now. So Kubernetes uses namespaces to organize objects in the cluster. You can think of each namespace as a folder that holds a set of objects. By default, the kubectl command line tool interacts with the default namespace. Now, if you want to use a different namespace, you can pass kubectl the dash namespace flag. So we're going to set a context, and we are also setting the namespace for that particular context. So I hope this is clear. So you can see that context 1 has been created. Now you can switch between contexts with the use context command. So for that, I'm just going to type use context. And I'm just going to type the context name. So we created a context that was named context 1. So I'm just going to switch to that. So it says switch to context 1. If you want to check the current context, we can just use the current context command, and you can see that it has been switched to context 1. Now I want to switch back to Minikube. I'm going to do that. And it says switch to context Minikube. That's great. You can also check out the list of contexts using the get context commands, and you can see that we have 2, that is Minikube and context 1, and the current one is where the star has been placed to. Okay, that is Minikube. Now, if you want to delete a particular context, we can do that. Okay, we will use the sudo kubectl config delete context and the context name. So we'll just name it context 1. Okay. Now it says deleted context 1 from the particular location. We can also view the contexts that are currently present, and we have only one, that's Minikube. So that's great. This is for contexts. So I'm going to repeat this again. A context in Kubernetes is an object that contains a set of access parameters for your cluster. I hope that's clear. Now let's go and check out namespaces. Okay, is basically again an abstraction that allows you to subdivide your cluster into multiple virtual clusters. Now, by using these namespaces, you can divide cluster resources among multiple teams and scope objects properly. Now, for example, if you have a development namespace for development and test workloads and a production namespace for production workloads, so you can really divide the cluster resources among these, 2 teams that we have. I'm going to clear the screen. So what now we're going to do is we're going to fetch and print a list of all the namespaces in your cluster, and we are going to use the get namespace command. So sudo kubectl get namespace. So you can see the output as default. kube node lease, kube public, and kube system. Okay, now if you want to set a namespace for your current context, our current context is Minikube, you can use the set dash context space dash dash current command. I'm just going to show that. And you can see the context Minikube has been modified. Okay. Now, if you want to create a namespace, you can just simply use the create namespace command. So I'm going to use the command sudo kubectl create namespace 2. That is namespace 2 is the namespace name that you would like. You want it to be 3, you want it to be 4. That's all up to you. I'm just going to name this namespace 2. And you can see that namespace 2 has been created. Okay, now we'll just list out all the current namespaces, and you can see that the namespace 2 has been created and it is active, and it has been created 11 seconds ago. Now you can also delete a namespace by using the delete namespace command. Deleting a namespace will delete everything in the namespace, including running deployments, pods, and other workloads. Only run this command if you're sure if you'd like to kill whatever's running in the namespace, or if you're deleting an empty namespace. So you have to be aware of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete namespace, and I'm going to delete namespace 2. Okay. You can see that namespace 2 has been deleted. That's great. And I'm just going to view the namespaces that are currently there using the get namespace command. And you can see that our namespace 2 has been deleted successfully. I'm going to clear the screen. Now, if you want to fetch all pods in a given namespace or to perform other operations on resources in a given namespace, make sure you have to include the dash dash namespace flag. Okay. So say that I want to get the pods of namespace default. And it says no resources are currently found in the default namespace, which is fair enough. So I'm just going to clear my screen now. And we will be talking about another command, the API dash versions command. So what this does is it prints the supported API versions on the server in the form of grouper version. Okay. And for that, we're just going to type the command sudo kubectl API dash versions. And this just gives the supported API versions on the server. Okay. So these are some of the most basic commands that are available. We used create, we used get, delete, we used describe, API versions, cluster info, and there are a lot more. But to just get started and to just understand how Kubernetes works, you will have to start off from the basics because this is a very vast topic. I think that you cannot go into detail that easily. You will need to have some experience over time with all of these commands that you use and their respective flags and their respective parameters that are involved here. Now let's move ahead to the next part of this session and talk about Minikube dashboard. Now the dashboard is a web-based Kubernetes user interface, and you can use it to deploy containerized applications to a Kubernetes cluster. You can also use it to troubleshoot your containerized application, manage cluster resources, get an entire overview of applications running on your cluster. You can also create or modify individual Kubernetes resources such as deployments, jobs, etc. For example, you can scale a deployment, initiate a rolling update, restart a pod, or deploy new applications using a deploy wizard. Now, to access the dashboard, you simply use the command Minikube dashboard, and this will enable the dashboard add-on and open the proxy in the default web browser. It is worth understanding and noting that web browsers generally do not run properly as the root user. So if you're in an environment where you're running as root, see the URL only option. To stop the proxy, abort the started process using Ctrl+C. So if you don't want to open a web browser, the dashboard command can also simply emit a URL, minikube dashboard -- URL. Now let's switch back to the VM and access the dashboard. So first what we're going to do is we're just going to type the command minikube dashboard. Now once the dashboard has been enabled, you will be automatically redirected to the dashboard page on your browser. So on top, you can see there's an overview button, and here you can see the workload, service, config and storage, cluster, settings, about, custom resource definitions, all of that. You can also see the workload status where you have deployments, the pods, and also the replica sets. Now to create an application, you can just click the plus button in the top right corner, and which will give you three options that says create from input, create from file, and create from form. Here you can specify the application name and also specify the Docker image that you want to use. So after all of that is done, you can just click on the number of pods, the service, and then finally you can click the deploy button, which will be presented with a new view that shows deployments and replica sets. And after a bit of time, you will also see a pod. So these are some of the key API primitives. So I'm just going to create from form. I'm going to type Redis, and also the container image will be Redis. Okay, and then I'm going to click on the deploy option. If you want to view the pods, you can just click on the pod option. If you want to view the replica sets, you can click on the replica sets option, and you can see the replica sets that has been created. You can also view the deployments by clicking on the deployments option. So we can switch back to the terminal now, and we can view all of this using the command kubectl get pods, rs, that is replica sets and deployments. You can see that the Redis pod has been created and the replica set Redis has been created, and also deployment has been created for Redis. Now your Redis pod will be running the Redis server. So you can see that using the logs command. And I'm just going to copy this. So here you can see all of the information, that is the version of Redis. You can also see the running mode and the port that it's currently activated on, and if it's ready to accept connections. So with this, we have discussed what is the dashboard and how to make the maximum use of the dashboard. Now let's switch back to our terminal and clear this. So what we're now going to do is we're going to learn how to manage your clusters. You can pause Kubernetes without impacting deployed application using the mini pause command. You can also stop the cluster by using the Minikube stop command. As the same way we started the cluster using the Minikube start option, you can also stop it. Okay. You can also increase the default memory limit by using the config set memory command. Okay. You can also browse the catalog of easily installed Kubernetes service. You can do this by using the command sudo minikube add-ons list. You can browse through the Kubernetes services. You can see that the dashboard has been enabled, the default storage class has been enabled, also the storage provisioner has been enabled, and the REST ingress and log viewer, ambassador, autopause, all of that has been disabled as of now. We aren't using it. If you want to delete all of the Minikube clusters, you can use the command minikube delete -- all. I'm going to clear the screen. Now, if you want to view the various commands in Minikube, you can just simply type the command minikube -- help, and this will list all of the commands that you can really use. You can see that there's the configuration and management commands like add-ons, config, profile. There are also advanced commands. You also have troubleshooting and debugging commands like describe, cp, authorization, which inspects authorization, and many other commands that you can use. We will now create a Kubernetes deployment named Hello Minikube using an existing image named Echo Server, which is a simple HTTP server with the port set to 8080 using the -- port flag in our command. So you can see that I have typed out the command sudo kubectl create deployment hello minikube image is equal to k8gcr.io/echo server 1.10. And it says that hello minikube has been created. Now to access the deployment, you will have to enter the command expose deployment. The -- type is equal to node port flag specifies the type of the service. So you can see that the service hello minikube has been exposed. Now to verify this expose, you just type in the command kubectl get deployments. You can see that it is ready and up to date and also available right now. Now that the deployment has been exposed, I'm just going to clear the screen. Now you can just use the kubectl get services command. and you can just check out all of the services that are currently running. Now, if you want to delete this service, you can just simply use the kubectl delete service hello minikube. And once that is done, you can see the services that are currently present and you do not have Minikube in it. And if you want to stop Minikube, you can simply type in the command sudo minikube stop. Once that is stopped, you can also delete Minikube by using the minikube delete command. So once you have Minikube up and running, the following tips can really help you get the most from the environment. First one is to sharing your Docker daemon. A Docker daemon is included with Minikube. This is the same daemon you use for Docker-only deployments and can be shared between Minikube and Docker. Now, if you share, you can speed up your local tests and make any Docker builds you create available to Minikube. The second one is using add-ons. Now, add-ons we already saw in the demo session. They're just the extensions of Minikube that you can enable or disable to provide access to advanced features. Add-ons can enable features like the dashboard, registry, credentials, or ingress. You can also use add-ons that are already available, or you can use customizable add-ons by modifying the associated YAML file. The last tip is to gain access to host files. Now, if you want to make files on your host system available to containers running inside Minikube, you have a couple of options. First, you can use Minikube's mount command, which uses a 9p file system implementation under the covers to expose host files to the Minikube VM. Now, the Minikube 9p mounts have some performance impacts compared to hypervisor native mounts and work best for directories with just a few files. As an alternative, some hypervisors automatically mount a host system directory and make it available for use inside the Minikube virtual machine. Now, these special mount points that we're talking about provide superior performance to the user-definable Minikube 9p mount points. So these are a good option if you need to expose a large collection of files to the containers you're testing inside Minikube. Unfortunately, the hypervisor guest mount points differ depending on the host system OS and hypervisor you are using. So these are some tips that you will have to really remember when you're using Minikube or when you're starting to use Minikube. Now we'll go ahead and check out a case study of how Kubernetes has helped Booking.com achieve their business goals. So the problem in 2016 was Booking.com migrated to an OpenShift platform, which really gave product developers very fast access to infrastructure. Now, because Kubernetes was abstracted away from the developers, the infrastructure team became a knowledge bottleneck when challenges arose. So they were trying to scale that support that wasn't sustainable. So after almost a year of operating with OpenShift, the platform team decided to build its own vanilla Kubernetes platform and really asked developers to learn some Kubernetes in order to use it. They believe that it is not a magical platform and they're not claiming that you can just use it with your eyes closed. Here, developers really need to do some learning and they're going to do everything to make sure that they have access to that particular knowledge. That was the solution that came up with Booking.com. Now, despite the learning curve, there has been a great uptick in the adoption of the new Kubernetes platform. Before containers, creating a new service could take a couple of days if the developers understood Puppet or weeks if they didn't. So Puppet is the tool here which they used. On the new platform, on the other hand, it could really just take as few as 10 minutes. About 500 new services were built on the platform in the first 8 months. Booking.com has a long history with Kubernetes. In 2015, a team at the travel platform prototyped a container platform based on Mesos and Marathon. Impressed by what the technology offered, but in need of enterprise features at its scale, the site handles more than 1.5 million room night reservations a day on average. The team decided to adopt an OpenShift platform.